Welcome to another episode of The Brand Called You, a video and podcast show that brings you leadership lessons, knowledge, experience, and wisdom from hundreds of successful individuals from around the world. Today, it is my privilege to welcome a very senior technology leader from the US, a very dear friend, and someone who seems to have achieved a lot in life. Camie Shelmire, welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me, Ashutosh. I appreciate it. It's nice to be here.
Thank you. Camie has spent a lot of time with Altran Technologies, which is where she is now. Of course, the company has been through many avatars. She's also spent time with KPMG. So Camie, tell me, what would you say are three key milestones in your life or career?
So 3 milestones that I was thinking about when I was thinking about you and I having this conversation were forks in the road in my career. And so the first one I would think about is how I came into, after graduating from college, getting my first job with KPMG. And back then they were interviewing all MBA students. And so they had interview days for these MBA students. And when I started to approach the recruiter, they would say, well, you don't have an MBA. And so through what I look back on now as perseverance, I would touch base every month, and they say the squeaky wheel gets the grease. And I just kept calling once a month to just check in with that recruiter. And so finally she said, okay, Camie, I will give you an opportunity and put you in one of our MBA interview days. So I think that's how I got my start, if you will. And that was the first milestone. And I ended up spending 12 years at KPMG, and I was approached or recruited for an opportunity to leave and go into industry. And I think that was the second fork, in that they say that consulting and industry is very different, and lifetime, quote, consultants have a difficult time sometimes translating that skill into industry. But I took the chance and I did it, got out of my comfort zone and went into this industry job. So that was very exciting to make that transition from consulting. And then the third fork in the road was when I was approached to go to work for Aerosent by Frank Kern. And I thought I was going probably back to Big Four consulting at that time. And out of the blue, an opportunity that I'd never thought of or considered presented itself. And so I view that as, instead of going back to what I knew, I took a risk in that I hadn't done this before, and it wasn't something that I had thought about doing. And it turned out to be the greatest, biggest learning experience of my career. So that was kind of the third fork that brought me here.
Incredible. So, Alicent, Altran, and now Capgemini. Tell me about your current role.
So my current role for the past year has been unifying the go-to-market. We're a very global company, so it's bringing together the go-to-market strategy, the sales, the supporting sales operations, and the client experience for a geographically dispersed set of teams across the globe. And we've been focusing on that for over 2 years now.
And you're the Global SPP for sales and customer experience. Tell me, based on all the time that you spent in technology, how has customer experience started to change or evolve?
So I think that clients are looking today for value add. So it's not just about the contract or what you've committed to in the contract, but it's about the value add you can bring. When I go in to talk to clients all the time, they talk about our teams and the incredible engineering talent that we have. And that is always something that comes across for many years now in my role. However, when I talk to clients about what they need, they want those, the people, our engineers, to add the value that the experience that they've had over the years, and really leverage that knowledge to help the client solve their business problems. So it's not just about what we're contractually obligated. It's looking to build that relationship by really bringing value and helping the client solve the business problem. And clients really appreciate that partnership mindset. So they're definitely looking for the additional value that we can bring to them.
So in what you're really saying is that in addition to just delivering the best product at the best possible time. Now they're looking for something much more than
Yes.
what is just time and delivery.
Yes, they definitely want additional insights into their business, and they want to know that we understand where they're trying to go and what their issues they're trying to solve is.
Okay. And you're also, the head of global HR. Previously, okay. So in your previous role as the head of HR in technology, what were some of the challenges you faced in managing global teams? And I know you were managing teams across the entire world.
So this is true. And when I reflect back on this role, it was the highest learning experience in my career to date. But being a chief people officer is an interesting challenge in that you can always put off the PowerPoint to a little later. You can always put off, holding the meeting or writing the document or the proposal. But people are in a good, exciting way, a 24/7 thing that doesn't stop. So I think that's the first thing. So you're on 24/7 in that role. As far as managing many cultures and a lot of diversity and a lot of geographically dispersed teams, I think the first challenge was getting people in those locations and building out those global teams to really come together as one unified team, so that it didn't matter where people woke up in the morning and put their feet on the ground. How do you really create a seamless team that services all of our internal clients and our people? So I would say that was an exciting challenge. And then the second thing that I reflected on is that role often ends up becoming a confidant to the CEO. And in that role, you learn a lot as well. But it's true, it's lonely at the top, and CEOs don't have a lot of confidants, if you will, that they can bounce ideas off of. So that's a second piece of that role that's not only exciting and challenging, but I think that the learning curve and the opportunity there, it was a great experience.
What you're saying is so fascinating. When I was growing up, and I'm much older, HR head used to be called the personnel manager, in large companies. And that, you were personnel director, and then became human resources. But what you're saying is so true, that the chief people officer is one of the closest individuals to the CEO, because of the incredible amount of resources that are managed.
Yes.
What is your perspective on multiple cultures being managed, and what kind of feedback would a CEO be looking for?
My perspective is, as you're trying to manage multiple cultures, I think that you have to, it takes a lot of time, again, as a chief people officer. You really need to understand the culture, and then you need to understand underneath you, your leadership team, and what motivates them and what drives them and how they work. I think as far as managing those teams, a CEO is looking for the pulse of the people, because especially in a services business, I don't like the term human capital management, but I think you have to bring innovation to the workplace. So I think a CEO is looking for innovation in their workplace, and also the pulse of the people or the teams to understand what we need to do to help support them and drive high performance. So I think that's critical knowledge for a CEO to have. So if you will, the softer side, as well as the data, attrition data, et cetera, but the softer side is what really needs to be analyzed and fed back to the CEO so that he understands where his people are, because that's your number one asset in a services business.
Terrific. So, over the years that I have known you, you have been through some amazing transitions. You were first Arisent, it got acquired by Altran, and Altran got acquired by Capgemini. Tell me, what are the challenges that are faced by the company that acquires and the company that is acquired?
So I think the company that is acquiring, I think, again, this goes back to just what I said. The number one priority when they acquire is the people, because that's really what they bought, is the people and the skill set. And how do we retain how do we identify top talent, and how do we retain top talent, and really getting a pulse again as you have the change, a strong change management program as you acquire them. And then the second big thing I think you have to consider when you're acquiring a company is, how do you blend the teams? So it's not about identifying the top talent at the company I just bought and fitting it in under my current team so that they feel overwhelmed or taken over. I think it's about, how do I take the top talent from the acquired company and seamlessly form a new best of breed team with both sides, so that it's a new team with a new construct, even though you were acquired. So I think that's the challenge for someone who has purchased a company or acquired a company. I think when you're getting acquired, the top concern is, how do you communicate, and sometimes in the absence of information. So you need to keep the communication flowing. You need to keep the people focused on making their numbers or making their quarter or doing their job every day to the best of their ability, and not getting sidetracked and worry. There's a lot of worry associated with being acquired for everybody at all levels. But I think at the top level, leaders really need to consider, how do I keep communication open and transparent? And in the absence of information, because maybe they're still working out the organizational construct, how do I communicate and make people feel calm and be able to focus on their business as usual jobs?
Very interesting. And I remember when I was going through a process of acquiring, and then I was coaching somebody also at a later date, the biggest challenge that I found was that it's not the process that we acquired or having been acquired, but it's integrating the top management teams, because a lot of the issues come up between individuals. I'm the boss, you're not the boss. I'm the one who's acquired you. Yes, but I'm doing a bigger job than you.
Yeah. Yes, it is. And it's fitting those top personalities in so that everyone can feel top, but also the best and highest use of their talent.
Absolutely. So, you have worked with multiple organizations. You had so many leaders who have evolved into CEOs. From a people perspective, what do you think are some of the key qualities a CEO should have, irrespective of how big the business may be?
I've had a very detailed discussion with our mutual friend, Carrie, on this topic. And so I think number one is intellectual curiosity, which I've never met a CEO that didn't have, by virtue of the fact they're in that role, a high level of intellectual curiosity. I also think, and I've met CEOs of varying degrees, CEOs need to have some degree of self-awareness, so that they, in order to reverse course when needed, to correct an action they thought was the right course, but it turns out it's not, or just self-awareness about their style and constantly be, trying to be better as far as whatever they need for their leadership. And then the other is, as you would suspect, an intense drive to succeed. And I think CEOs are a good quality is the dreamer quality, the visionary. We can do anything. We can make this happen, absolutely, and we're marching forward. And then I think you have the blended team to execute, carry that out, and tweak it and support the CEO. But they definitely need to be a little bit of, absolutely, it can be done, and here's the dream, and let's march forward to that.
Terrific. So 2 more questions before I move to another segment. Having worked with teams where they run to thousands and thousands of individuals, and a very large number of them being millennials, what have you experienced in terms of managing millennial aspirations?
So I think that we moved towards addressing those over the last few years, as far as they want a company that wants to give back, a company that's very socially active and aware. Strongly, they want the work-life balance. And I think, especially during the pandemic, we have, I think, a lot of happy millennials, because we all work from home now, or a lot of us, the majority of us are working from home. So I think that we as a company over the last couple of years have addressed that as far as driving towards, CSR programs, work-life balance, and really trying to understand what motivates them. And it's not obviously that it wasn't first and foremost money or the dollars or the salary. It was the work-life balance and being very socially aware.
So that's a great segue to my next question on work-life balance. From all the time that I've known you, you seem to be spending a lot of time on the plane. How do you manage your work-life balance?
So I would say on a personal front, it's about, it does take a village, and especially when you have a career and a full-time job. So balancing on the personal front is, whether that's your family that supports you or people outside the home that you hire in to help you. I think for me, it's about planning, and then having a system to prioritize. It's the same with me on the work front as far as planning and prioritization, whether it's my extended team or my critical sidekick, Susan, my EA. I think, and it's always looking ahead. So I find if I take the time to plan ahead, whether that's looking at my calendar a week or two out on a Friday, I think that we as long as you can pre-plan, you can always rejigger it or revise it. So we always do a lot of pre-planning, and I think that helps. We have a system to prioritize, and 1 week you're going to have personal things that have to be dealt with, and another week you're going to look at your week and say, I'm absolutely slammed, so I'm going to send all those personal things to the next week where I'll do the calls or the follow-ups on that. So I think it's about balance, planning, and prioritization.
Terrific. So I'm going to move to another part of our conversation, which is on gender balance.
Yes.
I mean, your company seems to have really broken the glass ceiling for a lot of women professionals.
Yes.
And yet, while gender balance is being recognized, from whichever women I speak to, they say not enough is being done. I want to get your perspective on gender balance and what can be done to correct it, and not just from a US perspective, but from a global perspective.
Yes. And I think we've reached a time, as we all know, with the news and what's happening today, where the spotlight is squarely on companies and on our shoulders to really address this. I think that obviously there's no company today in the world that is going to be able to not do more and more, because the spotlight's really on it. I would say on gender diversity, the excuse of there's not enough qualified women in the pipeline is not going to work anymore.
Yep.
And so therefore, I think leaders need to be extremely conscious of building qualified women into the pipeline, and then let the interview happen and decide who your best candidate is. But I think that you really, where it has to start or be a focal point, is to make sure that you're very conscious and very purposeful in building qualified people or candidates, women, into your pipeline when you interview. The other thing I would say is it starts with how do we make it, it's a two-way street. So how do we allow women to leave the workforce for a while and have children and come back from maternity leave? And again, that needs to be very conscious and thoughtful process and programs, and working with these female candidates or employees that are leaving to go have children. And how do you make sure that they come back into the workforce? It might look a little different, the construct, but they can work just as hard to do a job well done. But we have to maybe look at the construct and a little bit of flexibility for getting the same job done in the same time. It just might look a little different. And we have to make it easier for them to want to come back.
Terrific. So now I'm going to move to the last section, which is some questions for you personally. Camie, what a great career you've had, and there's so much more waiting for you ahead. My question to you is, what does success mean to Camie?
So success, I think you always have to take, or at least I do, success on the personal and the professional front. So during the pandemic, the good thing about, if there is good, is the time that we've all had to reflect. And so I think success on the personal front is, I definitely over the last 9 months have been counting my blessings on the support system, the friends, the family. I also have reflected on a professional front of what does success look like right now and going forward. And I think that I draw inspiration from the people that I work with. And I think on these Zoom calls, we've gotten to spend a lot of one-on-one time in a quieter setting as we do our work. So I reflect on success at work, having a well-rounded team. And I reflect on, after the pandemic's over, how do I as a leader build successful teams, but also be cognizant of people's health, people's energy. We all used to jump on an airplane and go to the smallest meeting. And now we know some of that can be done through Zoom.
Cool.
So I think I want to take that on a professional front and make sure I translate that as I think about as a leader, as I think about how to build teams and how to build successful teams.
Interesting. Next question to you is that, when you look at goals, how do you set your personal and professional goals?
So I take goals in chunks, and I do it the old-fashioned way. I love to write them down. Okay. I keep a black notebook and I divide them, strangely, on professional on one side and personal on the other. And I set the goals and I try to make them manageable. And then I try to think about the steps that I'm going to take to achieve them and the timing. And then I try to dive in quickly, because I think a goal resting on a piece of paper, if you don't have the time to address it, then maybe you should slot it in for another time. But I think that once you break down the steps, you just go for it and you dive in, and then you check your accomplishments. But writing things down is critical for me, the good old-fashioned way, and thinking about it.
I agree. And that's something I would do all the time, detailed notes. So my next question to you is, if you, Camie, were a role model to millions of children who closely followed you and your life choices, what is the one thing you would change about yourself?
So I would say, in thinking about your question, I would say I would advise, and this is more, I would advise people to make sure that if you want children and you want a family, that go ahead and just do it. Okay. There's going to be no perfect time in your career. And I would even say that the biological clock is in total conflict with the career building time in your life. They come at exactly the same time. Okay. And no bell is going to go off and say, now's the perfect time to have children. So you just have to plan for it and you have to do it. And again, another situation where it absolutely takes a village. And you surround yourself with the support system, and definitely take the time to do it, because there's never going to be those years, you're never going to get them back. And I think it's a wonderful thing. So don't wait for the bell to go off. Just when the time's right, do it, and you will make a way in your career to balance both. Maybe not equally at times, it's a give and take, but you'll be able to balance it.
Okay. And my last question to you now, I come back to the pandemic. We've all been affected by it across the entire world. My question to you is that, how are you rethinking your life in a new world order?
So I think, and I've already talked a little bit about this, but I think in the new world order, being work from home globally, has given you time, obviously, to have some semblance of, for me personally, not living on an airplane, that produces, better sleep, better working out habits and exercise habits, and better eating sometimes. But I think that now when we go back, to business as usual, and we do start to have the ability to meet in person, because I do think the teams are missing that. I think they're missing the human contact of being in meetings with their teammates. I think that there's sometimes, especially with our clients, there's no better meeting than being face-to-face with them and being in person. But I want to go back and I want to look at how do you grow teams, and how do you respond to being back in a more measured way as far as travel and in-person meetings, and providing a healthy, well-balanced routine for your teams. So I think somewhere there's a little more than a happy medium. And I hope we don't quickly, all of this reflection the last month, I hope that we don't quickly lose all those perceptions perspectives that we have on that.
I agree.
Because I think it's really important.
I agree with you. Camie, thank you so much. It's been such a pleasure speaking to you. I
Thank
wish
you
and everything that you're doing lots of success.
Thank you. It was good. Thank you for having me. I really appreciate it.
Thank you. Thank you for listening to the Brand Called You videocast and podcast, a platform that brings you knowledge, experience, and wisdom of hundreds of successful individuals from around the world. Do visit our website www.tbcy.in to watch and listen to the stories of many more individuals. You can also follow us on YouTube, Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. Just search for the Brand Called You.